Let's react to Mina's video called The Crazy World of Korea's Plastic Surgery Industry. As a double board certified facial plastic surgeon, I hope that my commentary will be helpful here.
Hello, my beautiful doves. As some of you may have guessed, I am Asian American. Surprise! And like many Asian Americans, I went through a phase where I just about worshipped the K-pop industry. For me, this phase took place during sophomore, junior year of high school, to the point where I would wake up at 4 a.m. before class started just so that I could watch my favorite groups performing on Mnet because, you know, the time difference. This was also the first time that I discovered the Korean beauty industry because K-pop and beauty go hand in hand. Idols are constantly promoting products, doing product placements. Most idols also got plastic surgery, and this was something I was really shocked by at the time because in America, if a pop star got plastic surgery, it was like a major talking point, derogatory. People are really mean about it, so a lot of stars try to hide the fact that they got procedures. But in Korea, it's very blatant. You can easily find before photos of every single idol, and there's just not a lot of stigma. People actually praise the results when they're good. At the time, I was in awe of these surgical transformations. I truly believed that every idol looked so much better post-plastic surgery. And as a result, I became obsessed with what kind of work I would get done when I finally got the disposable income to fly to Korea and pay for my new face.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes I feel like risk isn't something that's discussed enough, right? I released a video not that long ago about the risks and complications of facelift surgery. And to my chagrin, there were people who were posting in comments like, oh, he's just, he's not telling the truth. He's just fear-mongering. This isn't true. It doesn't exist. To me, that's crazy. I was giving statistics based on the literature. This is not like an opinion of mine. This is just that, invasive surgery has real risk. So that is just a fact. And so people need to, I think, understand those risks and complications better before they make these types of decisions about altering their face. Also, of course, this brings up a great point of us growing into our faces and thinking through, like, what does our appearance mean to us? And that's something that morphs and changes. And, it's not like we think of ourselves the same way when we're 16 versus when we're 26 or 36 or 46. And there are definitely plenty of cases where people had surgery when they were young and then later on they regretted it. Or some people don't have any procedures when they're younger, and even though they've considered them, and then when they're older they realize, oh, thank God I didn't go through that. So I'm not here to tell you to do a surgery or not do a surgery, but think it through and take your time and just realize that you 10 years from now may feel very differently from you now.
Like, this was so locked into my future plans. Obviously, over time, the plans have changed, and I started becoming really upset with what the plastic surgery industry has done to us as a society on a global scale. In terms of the Korean surgery industry, I became much more informed about the oppression that dark-skinned or mixed Koreans experience, as well as the experiences of other demographics of Asians who are affected by Korea's soft power. Like, as a Vietnamese woman, it really disturbs me how looking Korean has become an aspiration for some of my community. Meanwhile, looking Vietnamese or looking Southeast Asian is often weaponized as an insult by East Asians.
Also, with a lot of these different procedures that are being performed, people are starting to look more and more alike. So you start to lose some of those unique attributes of being, like she said, Vietnamese or from anywhere else. I mean, everyone starts to kind of conform to a very similar look because it's the same type of surgeries that are being done on the faces. And so that tends to bring everyone closer to a common denominator. And I think we start to lose some of that uniqueness and that unique identity and what makes each of us special. In pop culture, especially in the traditional type, meaning like what we see on TV and like the biggest stars, right? Whether it's music or TV or anything like that, we're really often shown like one type of person. And maybe on like TikTok, we see all types of people succeeding with different types of looks, with different types of maybe even handicaps, but we still see like the A-listers kind of looking a certain standard way. And that unfortunately drives a lot of people to try to emulate the appearance of these individuals. And I don't think that's great. So I hope more and more that people can build up their reputations and their celebrity having all types of looks, all types of colors, all types of shapes, abilities, disabilities, genders, all that kind of stuff. I think can be a beautiful thing, and you can find your circles that way, and you can build up a nice community. So maybe we'll move away from like the true A-listers eventually, but that might take some time.
I also watched shows like Singles Inferno, which is a Korean dating show. And the first season was very controversial because some of the male contestants would say, literally point blank to the camera, that they liked a girl purely because she had pale skin, like nothing about her personality. All's to say that there's a lot going on in the Korean beauty industry, and I found that over time, it's just gotten more and more powerful, especially on a global scale. So I want to talk about it.
Off to Korea!
Today, I'm getting double eyelid surgery,
lip filler and Botox,
liposuction.
One of the fastest growing sectors in the travel industry, medical tourism.
General thoughts about medical tourism. There was just recently a gentleman who passed after a hair transplant in Turkey. That has also become a very common destination for not just hair surgery, but all types of cosmetic procedures. It's not to say that things like that don't happen in every country, right? Bad outcomes, unfortunate, deaths from cosmetic work. That happens everywhere, unfortunately. But it's just to say that like traveling to any place, anytime you go far from home, different things can happen. And if you don't have your support system there with you, if you don't really know anything about the hospital system that you're going to, or you just can't have someone locally there vouch for you, if you are in trouble, it can be a lot more complicated with recovery. It really doesn't matter if you're somewhere, let's say you're Korean flying to the US for surgery, or from, let's say you're going from the UK over to India for surgery. It really doesn't matter where you're traveling to, but just keep in mind that each place is different, the way things are run. And if you don't know that place you're traveling to well, it could potentially lead to some problems if your procedures don't go perfectly as planned. And you never know how it's going to go, right? Especially when it's more invasive surgery.
So first, I feel like we need to discuss what the beauty standards even are in Korea. There are many, but I would pin it down to big eyes and double eyelids, thinness, high nasal bridges, a V-line jaw, and pale skin. There is an emphasis on looking glowy and youthful, hence why aegyasol, the small puff of skin found under the eyes, is often highlighted as well, as this feature apparently adds a youthful charm to the face. These standards are also pretty unisex. While I think there are some crossover ideals, like the big eyes and the thin bodies, overall, Korean beauty standards are pretty distinct from Western beauty standards. And that's why I find it extremely irritating whenever I hear Americans saying things like, oh, everyone in Asia just wants to look white. In actuality, the favoring of white skin in Korea, white in quotes, predates Western colonization. It doesn't refer to race, it refers to the paleness associated with being high class during the Gojoseon period, which ended in 108 BCE. The belief was that the white skin suggested a labor-free life away from the sun.
It's a good point. Yeah, something that I think I also forget sometimes, but I think, well said. That's been a long time coming, and it has nothing to do with the Western way of thinking. So I think, good point.
Similarly, regarding double eyelids, Elise Hu notes in her book Flawless that it's actually East Asian movie stars with this feature who are considered the ideal. She writes, in East Asia, the double-eyelided Hwang Shin-hye, not Meg Ryan, had the most sought-after face. No offense to the beautiful Meg Ryan, of course.
We have a video on Meg Ryan's facial transformation if you want to check that out.
She also reports that of the hundreds of people she talked to for her book, not a single person said the motivation for plastic surgery in Korea is to look more European. Furthermore, anthropologists and scholars have uniformly found that the importance of local cultural dynamics trumps outside influences when it comes to health and beauty norms. Well, yes, there are some traces of European beauty baked into the Korean beauty ideal. Sophie Jin argues that this was not the result of idealizing whiteness, but the result of Koreans attempting to formulate a new national identity separate from their former colonizer, Japan. This look is sometimes called K-face by sociologists. Yip, Ainsworth, and Hugh note that this beauty standard is supposed to signal global integration and cosmopolitanism, and that the strategic combining of European elements with a predominantly Asian look gives off a worldly appearance.
Yeah, I mean, if if the K-pop stars are going to succeed around the world, they need to be somewhat relatable, perhaps. I mean, I'm not saying that should be the case, but it kind of is the case. So I guess incorporating some elements of how people look, at least in some Western countries, where all of these different albums are bought and concerts are presented, tying all that together can potentially, of course, create an even bigger superstar. And if that is the goal, then I think that's partly why we're seeing some of the plastic surgery trends that we're seeing.
It's very similar to Instagram face that we have in the West, in the way that the face combines various features of, multiple races to produce a somewhat ethnically ambiguous look. But K-face is still distinctly Korean, just as Instagram face is still distinctly white. Beyond the features themselves, there's also a lot of emphasis on proportions in Korean beauty marketing. For instance, the 1:1:1 face ratio that says you should be equally balanced between your brow, your nose, and your chin. And the leg ratio that says you should have a 5:3:2 proportion between your thigh, calf, and ankle.
Yeah, I mean, I know about all these numbers. I studied them. That was part of my training in plastic surgery. The issue is this: we're all built differently. No one's perfect. It's just not possible. And there's beauty in imperfection. So the danger of all these ratios is that people start to look the same and conform to the same ideals, and we lose that individuality. And we had a video not that long ago on this concept, and that to me is concerning. Beauty is truly in the eye of the beholder, and there's just so much beauty out there that does not conform to these numbers. People can be objectively seen as beautiful, and they don't have these numbers. And also, some people who are not maybe conventionally seen as beautiful can still very much find someone who loves them and can, create a great life together. So that's sometimes, I think, important to remember. And I think we need to zoom out of this specific conversation about beauty and plastic surgery in Korea and look at where are we going with this? What is the purpose, right? If the purpose is to be loved and to succeed in life, I don't think you need to conform to all of these ratios. Just my 2 cents.
The hyper-focus on proportions might stem from East Asian beliefs about first impressions. In Korea, it's a concept called insang. I'm sure the focus on specific proportions is also great industry marketing. These ratios designate seemingly objective measurements that you can measure your own body up to and thus modify accordingly at the clinic if you don't meet them. Calf botox literally exists to atrophy the muscle in your calf so that you can hit that golden ratio.
I understand optimizing, enhancing what you already have. Completely trying to change yourself and to try to, meet some specific ratio, I think is far from ideal as far as actually doing this type of cosmetic work. I don't have that ideal in my mind. The cosmetic surgery that I do, I just focus on hair surgery and lip surgery these days. And sometimes people will ask me, what's the ideal position for the hairline in general? And I said, no, it has to be customized to you, to your face, to your preferences, to your facial bone structure, to the rest of where your hair position is currently and where your hair might be down the road. And the same goes for lips. There is no perfect filtral distance. It's relative to the person's own face. And we take a lot of other factors into consideration. What is the status of their upper tooth show? What is the status of their lip volume? How does the symmetry look? How does the bottom third of the face balance out with the rest of the face? I mean, there's so many of these elements. So just trying to hit some specific ratio on someone's face that is not meant to conform to that ratio, I think is really problematic, both in terms of results, but also in the person's mental state. If they feel like they have to hit it, right? And if they don't, that there's something wrong with them. That's not a great way to live.
These objective ratios also allow people to measure other people's bodies as well. A few years ago, BBoss TV published a YouTube video called 9 Female Idols with Most Insane Body Proportions in K-Pop. In their video, they analyzed different idol bodies to determine who has the best body of each group. Crazy stuff. If you look in the comments, also, most of them are stating their own opinion of who has the best body rather than asking why we're even talking about this in the first place. There's also plenty of forum posts that feed into this body discourse as well. A Reddit post asking, what do fans exactly mean when an idol has good proportions? Received an answer that mentions a head-to-body ratio known as the 8 stacked heads test. aka, the perfect body is 8 heads tall. Actually, the perfect body is 5 apples tall, but whatever. Who mentions in her book a concept called the technological gaze. She defines it as an algorithmically determined set of ideal traits for our facial and body parts that social platforms feed us through the content we scroll. It represents a power shift from an external male judging gaze to a self-policing narcissistic gaze.
Yeah, I mean, especially in the day of AI, right? I mean, all these numbers can be hyper-analyzed and people lose track of like, what is the purpose of all this? Like, why are we so fascinated by this? Why do we feel like we need to hold our idols to this standard, or why we need to change ourselves to these standards? I think everyone has the right to look and feel their best, whether that's through cosmetic surgery or just good dieting or exercising or just meditation. Whatever floats people's boats, I think is fine as long as it's done safely and it doesn't hurt that person or anyone else for that matter. But looking at all these specific numbers, I think sometimes people are missing the big picture. And by big picture, I mean, is it going to lead to true happiness, right? Because what is the point of doing any of this stuff? And I would argue that the point of plastic surgery is usually to feel a little bit happier in your own shoes, whether it's the aging process sort of taking something away, or you were born a certain way. There's like, let's say, some specific feature that you're looking to adjust because you've been thinking about it for years and years and it's weighing on you. And that is a reason to potentially consider something. And we should not be chasing some special numbers. It's not a numbers game. It's a, look good, feel good game, if you will. It's not like you need to meet some special number so that people on Reddit are happy. That's not what this is about. It shouldn't be.
The self-policing tech gaze creates demand for what we should look like and also feeds it thanks to the attention economy that drives competition among the biggest tech companies. The technological gaze is present across any country that has access to social media. It's the reason why Instagram face is a thing and why everyone is getting the same treatments. Lip filler, chin lipo, rhinoplasties in America.
Yeah, and it's crazy because people are getting all this stuff done and then they still don't look like some of the models, quote unquote, on some of these platforms. And the reason is because of filters. The reason is because some of the models are fake. It's just like bots these days that are AI fake things. And then people are going for all these like invasive procedures and spending a lot of money. And then they're like, well, why don't I look like whatever person on Instagram or TikTok? And it's because none of it is real. So it's sad, I think, when people are chasing perfection or chasing a very specific look and it's not them anymore. It's someone completely different sometimes. That's a very different approach than just trying to optimize what you have and doing it for yourself and not trying to appease anybody.
But who explains that Korea is hyper-modern, which emphasizes the technological gaze even more? After all, it's the most wired place on earth, has world-leading internet speeds, and in 2006 had the highest broadband penetration rate in the world. Seoul is also the fourth most surveyed city in the world, ranked by number of CCTV cameras per square mile. As a result, it's unsurprising there's such a heavy emphasis on visual culture. I learned a few years ago that some K-pop idols even get nostril botox. It's because when they're performing on stage, camera operators will literally zoom in on specific idol faces while they're singing and dancing, and the quality is like 4K, so you can see every sweat droplet on their skin. And the botox is supposed to prevent the nostrils from flaring out in a non-photogenic manner during their close-ups.
I mean, come on, like we have to leave room for like being human. Can we not be human anymore? Are we supposed to all just be robots? Like, I know AI is here and there are going to be more robots walking around amongst us that probably will look human and maybe will eventually become part robotic, but like hopefully not for a while. So like while we still are human, let's try to act that way. And a little bit of a flaring of the nostrils should not be frowned upon, in my opinion. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below.
I mean, if we're going to zoom in on nostrils, what can't we zoom in on? Procedures like getting your armpit colorized, shaving the back of your skull to look more rounded, and getting Botox injected into your trapezius muscles. These are all incredibly specific procedures and hardly noticeable to anyone else. But the fact that people still get them done just goes to show how stringent beauty standards have become.
Yeah, some of the more unusual procedures that I've performed in the past, and again, this is just like a few of them, but in very specific cases, we have done this. I've done hair transplants with hair going to the underarms. so the armpits, the chest, and the pubic area. So there are people with very unusual requests, and if the situation is appropriate, like for the underarm case, for example, it was a person who had mirror dry performed, which is like to reduce sweating under the arm. But as part of that, one of the potential drawbacks of that procedure is loss of hair. So there was like a circular area of hair loss under the arms, and he was someone who performed on stage. He was like in a rock band, and he was very self-conscious about the lack of hair in the underarms, especially in this kind of circular type of way. So yeah, we did a hair transplant to the underarms, and he was thrilled and much happier performing after that. Every case is a little bit unique, but cases like that should not be the standard. This is kind of a one-off.
As an example of the government's purposeful investment in the beauty industry, in the early aughts, Seoul's cosmetic surgery clinics were actually on the verge of shutdown since there weren't enough patients. But in 2007, the Korea Tourism Organization established medical tourism as one of its focus areas for growth.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like a lot of the medical tourism in most countries, it becomes like a top-down type of approach, especially from countries that maybe are not classically thought of as like powerhouses of plastic surgery, especially in like the traditional sense. I mean, now, Korea, Turkey, people really do go to this place. Mexico, they're traveling and sometimes, getting some good work done, right? But like I can tell you in the US, I don't think at all that we have like a top-down approach to our plastic surgery where you have a lot of support from the government for inviting people into the country for plastic surgery. It just isn't exactly a thing here. If anything, we get taxed at a pretty high rate the more money we make here. So yeah, but I think in other countries, the governments are happy that people are now traveling more, spending more money in their countries. So in many ways, they're promoting the medical tourism into their countries, not just for general leisurely, travel and vacationing to their countries, but specifically for getting some of this work done. They're obviously benefiting from these clinics operating and existing in their countries. So again, something that I don't really often stop to think about, but I think that partly explains why some of these countries have grown quite a bit in their plastic surgery outputs. And it's largely promoted by the governments. So that's interesting.
Today, a medical tourism support center greets visitors at the Incheon International Airport, the entry point for the hundreds of thousands who visit South Korea for procedures each year.
The one other thing I'll say about that like imagine if there's a complication. You have a complication from a procedure. If in that country where you get the procedure, the government is promoting plastic surgery and making a lot of money of that sector, do you think they're going to be as inclined and motivated to reveal the exact details of your complication to, let's say, your home country or to news outlets? Or do you think they might sweep that under the rug? Something to think about, right? When you're choosing where to go for cosmetic plastic surgery. And that's not me talking people out of traveling to different countries. That's fine for plastic surgery if they've done their homework. But even in the best of hands, things happen, right? And how will that local government respond to your situation? Are they going to provide the right set of support for your family to visit you and to reveal like what exactly happened? Or are they going to want to keep it hush hush so that it doesn't disrupt the flow of economic improvements to their country? So something to think about.
You can also get a value-added tax refund if you get a cosmetic procedure that is over 15,000 Korean won or about 11 USD. As a result of this effort, the Korean beauty industry grew exponentially. In 2009, about 60,000 foreigners visited Korea for procedures. By 2019, the number of medical tourists reached nearly 500,000. By 2018, Korea boasted the most cosmetic surgeons and most plastic surgery per capita on Earth. In her investigative piece on Korea's plastic surgery industry, Patricia Marks visited a clinic in the so-called improvement quarter of the Gangnam district. She notes that in this area, there were between 400 and 500 clinics and hospitals within a square mile. Because of how popular Korea is as a medical tourism destination, there are now cottage industries of medical tour guides.
And many of these clinics will recruit different types of celebrities or influencers from all around the world so that they go there and they can speak highly of, their experience. And, there's a lot of heavy promotion on social media from, various countries and various clinics from different countries. And so there's a lot of eyeballs on clinics from all over that, again, serves as a wonderful marketing arm for those clinics, and it draws a lot of people in, and the prices are oftentimes better than, some other countries. That's, I think, partly what has allowed it to flourish to the extent that it has.
I still remember the first time I witnessed an influencer publicizing her medical tourism journey. This was back in 2017, so it was pretty shocking and memorable. She actually had a deal with a medical tourism agency called Doc Finder Korea. They essentially acted as a middleman, helping her to book her appointments, transportation, and accommodations. And with everything taken care of, it honestly starts to seem more like a vacation than a hospital visit.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the marketing tricks, is that there's always that illusion of it being just like, oh, it's just a wonderful vacation and I'm going to get something done. But like, don't be fooled. Like, that something is something that is permanently changing your life and your face or your body, and you can't really reverse it. And so don't think of it as like a vacation. Think of it as like you're going to get a real medical procedure that has potential consequences. So think it through and don't be drawn in just by some illusion of a vacation, which it is not.
There are plenty of travel vloggers who will go to Seoul and feature a cosmetic procedure as just one item on their travel itinerary, along with eating delicious food and exploring the city.
Oh my gosh, this smells so good.
So, what's the next step for the industry then? To build tourist attractions around the hospitals, obviously. Marks notes that one clinic she visited had its own plastic surgery museum, complete with, among other oddments, deformed skulls, post-operative shampoo, and a funhouse mirror.
The other thing is, like, when you get these different surgeries done, you need time to recover. You should not be running around, the city doing all these things. Like, you should be resting and recovering. I don't know how that affects people's ultimate recovery if they're doing all these events, but sometimes you just need to rest.
Websites like Visit Korea will actually advertise a combination of medical procedures and tourist destinations, with one itinerary titled Medical Tour Guide to Muon. Enjoy the city embracing the sea and tidal flats. The itinerary lists hospitals along with restaurants and natural wonders.
It's like, get your rhinoplasty and head to parasailing the next day.
So it's these kinds of luxuries and experiences that help make Korea a popular destination for medical tourism. But you might be wondering, why participate in medical tourism at all? Why go through the lengths of getting procedures over in another country when there are plenty of specialized doctors in many of our home countries?
Because it's cheaper. That's the number one reason why people go abroad, for surgery. And then, of course, there's the perception of expertise. When you have countries and clinics that are doing such volume of cases, sometimes it gives off the impression that, well, isn't this then the best place if they're doing so much of it? And while the answer may in some cases be yes, other times it's because it's like turned into like a mill. You show up and it's you and 50 other people getting the same thing done, and that doesn't necessarily bode well for individualized, customized care. So that's something to keep in mind. And so some people definitely are traveling because they think that's the best place, and it's not just about, saving some money. But I think in most cases still, the main reason for medical tourism for cosmetic plastic surgery is for people to spend less. And that's, just reality. A lot of people cannot afford plastic surgery in the place where they live. That's just what it is. I think that's really what's driving a lot of this travel, because they feel that it is possible for them, but they might need to fly to be able to afford the procedures that they're looking to do. That's, I think, the number one reason.
Well, a lot of procedures are actually cheaper in Korea than my home country of America. A Bloomberg article interviewed Julie Miller, a 46-year-old from New Jersey who was flying to South Korea to get Botox and skin tightening.
Botox might not be the most cost-effective thing to do like that far from home, because you have to repeat it every 3 months or so. So that's something you might want to do closer to home, because by the time you pay for your travel and all that and accommodations, it might actually be more expensive. But for something like a more cosmetic, surgical procedure, it might be financially more affordable than doing it locally at home, especially in the US.
Rebecca Chung Wilkins reports for Bloomberg. It's a trip that'll take her about a day, and the final bill for those treatments isn't cheap, about $3,000, but it's almost half the cost of doing it back home. She's right. Prices are cheaper. At Oracle, a clinic in Seoul, an entire region of Botox is as cheap as $30, whereas the same procedure in LA would be $200. As for double eyelid surgery, you can get one for $300 in Seoul. The price for the procedure in the US is 10 times higher.
But if complications do occur And this I see sometimes with people who contact our clinic. They go somewhere far away. They, let's say, live in New York, but they traveled really far to some other country for plastic surgery. And then they come back, right, like a week later, and they're having an issue. Issues occur. It doesn't mean that the doctor wasn't good, but like they could be having a little infection or a big infection, or there could be something wrong with the wound, or they might have stitches still in, and they don't know what to do about that. So then they reach out to a clinic, let's say like mine, and they ask for more emergent help. And we often at that stage don't really want to get involved, to be honest with you. And the same goes for a lot of doctors who, where that's not my patient and they're having a wound infection, I tell them to go to the emergency room where they can get the proper care. I tell them they can visit us once they've recovered from their acute issue if they're looking to adjust anything on the cosmetic side. And that's the way it often goes for people when they go far away and they can't reach their clinic again because the clinic's not answering, or they're on a different time zone and they just can't reach them. They can't get the proper medication because it's not like they're going to be sent an antibiotic from Korea or from Turkey when they're having a problem, and they don't have any other option but to go to like the urgent care or go to the ER. And then that care could actually be very expensive still in their home country. So people don't often think ahead, but it's important to.
Jungmi Jun, a researcher at USC, reported in her 2015 study that major surgeries in Korea are offered at a price 2 to 8 times lower than in the United States. Some hospitals will also price treatments low to get patients into their clinics in hopes that those patients will return for more expensive procedures later on. I also have multiple East Asian friends who just do not trust American doctors, believing that these doctors are uninformed about East Asian facial features and proportions and will botch them as a result.
There's definitely something to be said for going to someone who understands, your ethnicity, who understands your features, what your goals are. And of course, every person is different and every procedure needs to be modified to that person's, goals. But there are plenty of doctors in the US and in many other countries who do understand the nuances and, would do excellent work. You just have to find those doctors who specialize in it. So just do your homework and you'll find those individuals. Yeah, they're there. It's just like you have to look around.
And as I said before, the specificity of the procedures that you didn't even know you needed help to reinforce Korea's reputation as a technologically advanced country that will take care of you. Unless they don't. Like any country with a beauty industry, human error, predatory marketing, and clinics focused on bottom line profits will lead to botched results or even death. There's also a number of factors specific to medical tourism that can pose additional problems, such as the lack of translators and presence of illegal brokers. Personally, I find that the best recommendations for anything from medical doctors to restaurants to hiking trails, they all come from people I actually know, people who I trust to have gotten this firsthand experience. When you're a foreigner, unless you have friends or family based in that country that can tell you what's up, for the most part, you're going to have to rely on the internet to get your recommendations. And as the saying goes, don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like reviews can be potentially adjusted by the clinic, right? The marketing tactics can be very difficult to tease out from what's actually going on. Like, how do you truly know that anything you're reading online is real? It's hard to just rely on that. Of course, word of mouth is always going to be the most powerful. But I think first and foremost, if you have a good sense of who the provider is, the actual doctor that's treating you, that's really important. A lot of times these clinics just promote the clinic in general. And again, that goes for some places in the United States as well. And what I often say to people getting any type of plastic surgery is like, know who your doctor is, know their pedigree, know the work that they've actually produced, get a sense of their personality. If they're just hiding behind some clinic name and they're kind of this like faceless personality, it's very difficult to trust them, I think. And then if you just show up and trust the clinic, but you don't actually know which doctor you're getting, it could be a recipe for disaster potentially.
Predatory people across Reddit and other online forums will post fake reviews all the time. Even though this is illegal, some posters receive commissions from bringing in clients, which is why they do it. Doctors will also pay commissions to brokers who help foreign patients match with their clinics. I should add this is illegal for domestic patients. Korean law also prohibits the use of influencers for testimonial marketing, but influencers are often still part of a clinic's marketing scheme. The actual experience of getting the surgery can also be overwhelming and confusing. One American named Alex, who traveled to South Korea for a rhinoplasty, said she was rushed into surgery despite having reservations and not being able to speak with an in-house translator. After the surgery, she experienced complications including disfigurement due to the implant protruding through her skin, which forced her to get an emergency removal surgery in the US, which I'm sure was an extra wad of cash.
Yeah, we don't often hear about these kind of horror stories and problems that occur both domestically and abroad. And again, it's just scary when you don't have much recourse. If it happened elsewhere and then you travel back home and now you have to deal with all those problems and you can't even talk to your doctor, you can't get your op note as to like what exactly happened, which makes it much more difficult to be treated in your home country. So medical tourism has a lot of issues, and I think more and more lately it's become like this promoted thing that, is just like seen as such a positive. Oh, I'm going to go on a vacation and pay just a fraction of the cost and get this amazing result. And while that does happen for some people, there are a lot of more problematic instances that people don't often hear about. And so I don't think that's a very balanced perspective to have.
She told Al Jazeera, "I felt abandoned, like I was on a conveyor belt."
Yeah, I had a patient once who showed up to Turkey for a hair transplant, and he realized that he was in this large room, this common room with all these other guys. He said like at least 40 people in the room, and they were all patients for that day that were going to get their hair transplants done. And they were getting shuttled into these small little procedure rooms with teams of technicians in one facility. Like the sheer volume that they're doing is actually insane. So you have like 40 surgeries going on under maybe one doctor's supervision. And that's a scary thing. So that patient actually saw what was happening, and even though he already prepaid for his procedure, he ended up leaving, and he came back and had surgery with us, and he was just like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. So that happens too. Some people, they actually get to travel and then they change their minds. You got to always have an out. You should never feel so pressured, even on the day of. If you don't want to do it, just forget about the money. You might lose the money, but if it doesn't feel right, just go, just leave and find another place.
Once they had done the surgery, they didn't want to deal with me anymore. They kept saying I was still healing when I knew something was seriously wrong. Frustrated by inadequate aftercare and unable to secure a refund, Alex wrote a review with photos on the Gangnam Uni app, a popular plastic surgery review platform marketed as Uni outside South Korea. Eager to avoid negative publicity, the hospital offered a full refund, but only after she agreed to delete the review and sign a confidentiality agreement. The document, which was reviewed by Al Jazeera, prohibited her from discussing the contents of the agreement and her experience on any platform, with failure to comply resulting in financial penalties. Malpractice is everywhere. There's an entire reality TV show dedicated to fixing bad plastic surgery in the US.
You have to realize that it's sometimes a subjective thing too. Even if there was no complication in a surgery, a patient might just not be happy. They might not like the process, experience that they had. Maybe someone said something to them. Maybe it was like the receptionist or someone on the clinical team, and then they just kind of left a bad taste in their mouth. It's just like restaurant reviews, right? When you read them, it's not like necessarily that the food is bad. It's like they weren't seated on time or something, and it's like 1 star. So there's that. And then of course there's like just the subjectivity of the interpretation of the result. Some people just are not happy, even though objectively the surgery went according to plan. And if you ask like people to review the results, let's say like maybe 9 out of 10 would say, hey, this is a great outcome. But for that person, that's not what they thought it was going to be. And so they might not be happy. So it's not always like you have to have had some like terrible thing, like an implant extruding or a bad infection or ended up in the hospital to just not be happy with the outcomes. And that's something I think people need to realize when it comes to plastic surgery and figuring out if a clinic is a good clinic or not a good clinic, and they have some bad reviews. Well, what was the source of that bad review and what exactly happened in that case? And the truth is, like with any business, really, I mean, there's no way to make every single person happy every single time. And that's something that's been a hard realization for me, doing cosmetic plastic surgery now for the past 7 years in my own practice, I've had to come to terms with like, I can't make everyone happy. I can do my very best. I can try to minimize complication risks and all this type of stuff and really listen to my patients and try to deliver the best care and outcomes. And at the end of the day, I'm still going to have some, hopefully small percentage, which it is, who are just not going to be like completely satisfied. And that's reality. And that's reality no matter where you go, anywhere in the world. But of course, you want to go to someone who can give you the best possible chance of success. And hopefully you see eye to eye with the doctor and you have a good plan and the plan is executed very well. And then usually things result in a very predictable way, but you cannot make everyone happy. And that's one other thing I think worth mentioning.
Some procedures are also just more difficult to do than others. They're more high risk. BBLs have a notoriously high mortality rate compared to other surgical procedures. I'm not too familiar with the American legal system, which I'm sure is tricky to deal with even for citizens. But if you get a procedure abroad, it's even more difficult to navigate because you're not a citizen, so you have different rights. And I'm assuming you don't speak the local language, so you'll need translators, you'll need to somehow find a lawyer, etc. Additionally, it's hard to get restitution if an accident does occur because Korea has strict defamation laws that make it very difficult for anyone to sue. There's also the issue with ghost doctors, aka doctors who perform a surgery that another surgeon was hired for.
Yeah, this is what I was getting at. Like, people just go to the clinic blindly. Like, they're not actually like going to any specific doctor. And then the clinic just like plugs in the doctor for the day. And you don't know like what their experience is. And like, are they the doctor that produced the results on the website that you were seeing, or was that done by some other doctor and now they have this new doctor working for them? And like, it's just it can be very difficult to interpret and to be fully prepared for when you're arriving for your actual surgery.
They come into the operating room when the patient is under general anesthetic. It's technically illegal, but regulations are not heavily enforced because it's hard to prove. Many clinics don't have CCTV cameras in their operating rooms and, patients are knocked out.
Yeah, most of my surgeries these days are done under local anesthesia, so patients are generally awake and they kind of know what's going on, which I think is a safer way to do things. Certain surgeries, of course, cannot be done that way and people need to be put under. And then it's scary to think that, yeah, this could be something that happens to you. I mean, that's frightening, no matter what country it's happening. I've heard of stuff like this happening in the United States too. So again, it's not typically like a country thing. Like, people want to compare countries and be like, this one's better than this one for this surgery or that surgery. It's not about that. It's about, at the end of the day, a specific surgeon being responsible for your life and your surgical outcome and the team that they've assembled to work with them to help you achieve your goals. And that is how you should think of it when you're, trying to research, like, where should I go? That's the way to think about it, not just like the country or the clinic or whatever. It's the doctor, because that's who's responsible for you.
The reason the ghost doctor industry exists is because of how high demand these clinics are, but rather than just accepting fewer clients, they hire ghost doctors, usually younger, less experienced doctors, to maximize profits. Joe Elfing Huang, an associate professor of Korean studies at the University of Western Australia, told CNN that high-profile surgeons often use K-pop stars or celebrities to promote their clinic. But during busy periods, some just can't deal with the volume of patients, especially as star doctors also need to be available for consultations with new customers. Ghost doctors operate illegally in America too, but laws in Korea are pretty relaxed, even when malpractice is proven.
Because again, this work is being sanctioned in some way, as she's mentioned earlier, financially by the government. So of course they're going to turn more of a blind eye to stuff like this happening, because like, they have a lot to gain financially, like the political leaders, the whole function of the country, right? They're getting tax money from these clinics and all of that. I mean, I think in the States, our higher ups don't exactly think of it in that same way when it comes to plastic surgery specifically. I mean, they do, I think, in broader terms, but not necessarily for plastic surgery. So our rules are quite strict here, and we will get in trouble for things that are not done to a T if there's ever an investigation or whatever. So things have to be done properly and in the safest way possible, right? If you don't want to get into legal trouble, but of course, if you also have the patient's best interests in mind. So keep that all in mind.
For example, one doctor who asked a nurse to perform eyelid or nose plastic surgeries at least 90 times received only a 3-month suspension. Between 2008 and 2014, the Korean Society of Plastic Surgeons estimated that there were about 100,000 victims of ghost surgery in South Korea. I should clarify that just because you're treated by a ghost doctor doesn't mean anything bad will happen to you, but it is concerning to not know what's happening, and also it is illegal. So yeah, just not good. Overall, I'm not saying that Korea is a bad place to get work done. Obviously, many people go without any issues. But I think everyone at the very least should be informed no matter what country they go to, no matter what specific clinic they go to. Korea has this really good reputation, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do any research. There was a girl on TikTok that went viral recently, but she deleted her video, maybe because she was avoiding getting sued for defamation. But she was permanently blinded by her doctor in Korea when getting filler injected.
Remember also that these different procedures have real risk no matter who does them, right? So blindness can happen from filler in any country, by any doctor. Of course, there are things that can be done to minimize that risk, but it can never be brought down to zero. So just something to keep in mind. And, when we're talking about skincare, since you just brought that up, I do want to mention Feel Confident. It's a skincare and hair care brand that I started, and it's been, around now since April of 2024 with our cosmetic products. It's a high quality skincare and hair care brand that tries to keep prices affordable for people while also delivering super high quality ingredients, and we're very results driven as well. So make sure to check out our products if you haven't already.
People just have so much trust in these institutions, but you only have one body, so just be as informed as you possibly can if you must get a procedure. Despite the risks, cosmetic surgery has become pretty normalized both in Korea and in LA. A 2020 Gallup poll found that since the early 2000s, 70% of Koreans don't view cosmetic surgery as taboo. 1 in 3 women surveyed, all between the ages of 19 and 39, had undergone cosmetic surgery. 59% of men said they would get plastic surgery to improve their chances on the job market, a number that shot up 30% since 1994.
Yeah, and for men, the most common cosmetic procedure the last time I checked was liposuction, but then the next most common, I believe, is hair transplant surgery. So that has been on the rise, especially with the advent of FUE surgery, where the harvesting is done one at a time. And remember, we do FUE surgery for men and for women, but guys are seeing it as a great option to restore their hair because they can avoid that linear scar on the back of the head. So that's something that's been on the rise for a number of years. And it's interesting that there's less overall taboo. I think overall that's a good thing, but there's also, more people just being kind of shown the stuff all the time and maybe feeling some pressure to get some procedures done that they otherwise wouldn't have really thought of or cared about. And I think maybe that's, not a great thing. So it's a balance. I think people should have the option and the choice to do these procedures, especially if they're done safely and in good hands. But I think the pendulum in recent years is maybe swinging too far over in the direction of everyone should get plastic surgery. I don't think that should be the case either. So finding some in between is going to be a healthier way for, I think, society in general to move ahead.
Korean American journalist Jane Chung wrote for Business Insider that when she was 14, her family offered her double eyelid surgery as a middle school graduation gift. Chung refused because at the time she believed that permanent body modification was, quote, a tool of patriarchy to control and subdue women. She's not wrong.
Yeah, I don't think that these surgeries should be pushed by the families of individuals. I think that it should be very much the individual's own decision. This type of permanent modification with cosmetic plastic surgery, we should give our youth a chance to grow into their bodies and to decide for themselves if this is something that they want to do, not something that's pushed as a graduation gift. I think that's ridiculous.
Chung is not the only one who's been offered plastic surgery as a graduation gift, though. It's common enough in South Korea that dermatology and plastic surgery apps offer up to 50 to 70% off discounts to recent high school grads in a 3-pack of popular procedures: eyelid surgery, nose jobs, and Botox for jaw contouring.
A 3-pack? What is this, cereal? I mean, it's crazy.
Patricia Marks interviewed a Korean college student who said, when you're 19, all the girls get plastic surgery. So if you don't do it, after a few years, your friends will all look better, but you will look like your unimproved you. There's a statistic that 1 in 4 Korean mothers with daughters between the ages of 12 and 16 have suggested plastic surgery to them. An anonymous Korean woman told Vice that the pressure comes from wanting their kids to be socially accepted. She says, everyone is getting prettier and prettier, and some parents don't want their child to be the ugly one. It's like in the 90s if you got a Discman because your parents didn't want you to be the only kid at school without one.
Slippery slope, because we're just subjecting our youth to these not easily reversible procedures that they might later regret. And how would the parent feel if their kid has a complication during one of these cosmetic procedures? Hopefully not well. So I don't believe in that. I think that's the wrong approach. I would never suggest to my daughter, who's 6, by the way, right now, that she should get something done, ever. If anything, we're just always, as parents, with my wife, are telling her like how beautiful she looks, and more importantly, how smart and caring she is. And we want her to feel as good as possible in her shoes. If she one day has something that she wants done and has a great reason for it and has really given it time and has thought it through over the course of years, not like a month, I will support her decision and help her find the best possible doctor who can help her. But I will be more than happy if she never wants to do a cosmetic plastic surgery procedure, especially, in her kind of younger years of, let's say 20s, 30s. Beyond that, then the aging process takes hold and people have different views. But what she's talking about is like teenagers, right? Getting these kind of graduation gifts. Never. It's just not happening for my family anyway. But I think, again, everyone approaches this stuff differently and has different views. But I don't think that this should be like a global phenomenon that is, condoned by the rest of us. It shouldn't be that. And there's a movie, I think it's called Uglies. It's some sort of dystopian movie. Yeah, it's like a science fiction novel by Scott Westerfeld. It kind of highlights some of these general themes that we're discussing. So if you guys want to check that out, I think it's out on like Netflix or something like that.
This weirdly reminds me of the whole Japanese bento box phenomenon. Walk with me here. In Japan, it's common for mothers to invest a lot of energy into preparing aesthetically pleasing bento boxes or lunch boxes for their children. It can take hours to prepare all the ingredients, source the right tools, and shape all the foods. Ruriko Tomita, a 43-year-old Japanese woman with 2 young children, told National Geographic that she knows mothers who get up at like 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning cutting seaweed with scissors. Mariko Oi wrote for BBC about this and explained that the reason why they do this is because there is an underlying guilt that we, many Japanese working mothers, feel. It was our choice not to give up our careers, so our children shouldn't suffer because of it. She also notes that this is an expectation put on mothers by their communities as well. One woman confessed to her, "The pressure that my bento must be judged by the teachers makes it even more stressful." Makiko Ito, author of the Just Bento cookbook, says that bento is a reflection of parenthood. A lot of it is caused by the fact that many parents want to get their kids into a good kindergarten, and for that, they have to pass the test. So the better the parents perform in their parental duties, including making the right lunches, the more likely their children will be accepted by good schools and receive a better education.
Wow. So it all starts with a gray bento box. I had no idea. I just visited Japan earlier this year. We released a video about my trip with my dad, if you want to check it out. And this is something that didn't really come up on the trip, but kind of fascinating to think that you need to perfect the bento box and be better than other mothers making bento boxes to get into a good kindergarten. There's a lot we do in the US as well to try to get our kids into certain schools and for them to outshine other people. I mean, it's kind of an arms race, I guess, to a degree. But yeah, the bento box phenomenon so far has not hit the States, but something I think analogous we already have here.
A 36-year-old Japanese woman named Kyoko Sudo also told Nat Geo her personal experience of being bullied over bento when she was in school. She recounted, "Kids started complaining about what my mother made."
Maybe the equivalent here is like all the extracurriculars that we need to put our kids through so that they're constantly active and constantly doing well and excelling in ways that then we can put on a resume. My kid goes to karate and to ballet class and to pottery and to, an extra language and math tutor. And it's just like so much that we put in our kids when at the end of the day, I think they just want to be kids and they want time to play and to be with their friends and not just go to a million classes in addition to school. So it's interesting.
Maybe Kyoko's family is very poor because she only has 1 egg and 1 sausage. They judged me and my family, So in a similar fashion, I think that a lot of the parents encouraging their kids to get plastic surgery are coming from a good place. They want their kids to fit in, to not be bullied, to get good jobs later in life, and they don't want to be judged as being bad parents, etc. But ultimately, it is another pressure point that reinforces structural lookism. Lookism is social prejudice against those who fail to meet a certain appearance standard, and the word stems from the fat acceptance movement. Lookism is prohibited by a 1995 Korea law, but Helen Chu, a Korean beauty entrepreneur, explains that often the first thing anyone says when they meet you is related to looks. And as I said, it's structural. A 2017 South Korean poll found that nearly 40% of respondents experienced discrimination based on their appearances when applying for jobs. Up until 2019, when the practice became illegal, it was common for job applications to require headshots from their candidates. Job listings will also use terms like neat and beautiful to describe ideal candidates. One advertisement that drew media attention specified C as the ideal bra cup size.
And again, with AI that we have today, I think more and more people will maybe fake some of these headshots to get a certain job interview, for example. Of course, it might be harder for them to fake it once they show up, but at least it might get them in the door. Yeah, I think, there's something to be said for trying to compete with other families, for example, to get your kids into a school with a bento box or classes they might take outside of the school. But to do it with plastic surgery, I think that's maybe going a little bit too far. It's just pushing the concept and then the premise a little just too far, in my opinion, because you're really putting excessive risk onto your kid and you're opening them up to something that they cannot later reverse. So I don't like that approach. And I hope that it doesn't continue to move more and more that direction. Maybe we'll all start to feel a little bit more awakened and maybe just reverse this course. That is my goal, because I don't like the image of what this will look like if everyone just starts to adopt these types of approaches when it comes to plastic surgery being pushed onto kids by their families.
Even the Ministry of Employment and Labor once shared a link on Twitter encouraging job seekers to mind their looks, suggesting cosmetic surgery has become one of the 7 credentials needed for employment, and asking what type of face companies preferred for its applicants. The post has since been removed. So it's not a purely superficial interest to get work done. There are actual consequences for being ugly. And honestly, I think if I was in a situation where I literally could not get a job because of the way I looked, I would consider plastic surgery way more seriously.
Yeah, I think if there's a specific job that you want and there's a certain requirement of appearance, then maybe then, it makes sense to consider getting something done. But there's always a different path to take. You can always get a job where maybe your look is not as critical. It's not like every job is completely client facing. So, yes, it stinks to have to maybe modify your original game plan. But, plenty of people want to be, basketball superstars or as professional athletes, but they maybe just don't have the right height. They don't have the right speed. And so, yeah, I think if someone wants to be a K-pop star, but maybe they don't have the exact physical attributes to do that, yeah, maybe then it makes sense to get something done. I get it if that's specifically what you want to do. But there is always some job that will be happy to have you in that industry with any type of appearance or any type of physical attribute. And so I think it's sad when people feel like they have to get something done, but I also understand why maybe for certain types of jobs it's a lot more critical than others. I wish it wasn't the case, but I do understand what she's getting at here.
Obviously, I'm not in support of the cosmetic surgery industry because at the end of the day, this perceived independence and being able to change your appearance still reinforces a neoliberal mindset that each of us needs to self-improve in order to compete in the market. Also, worrying about aesthetic labor distracts us from focusing on actual structural inequality. So I don't agree with it, but I'm just saying there's reasons, and stepping outside of a system is more difficult than just paying $300 for double eyelid surgery.
But remember, it's not just about paying the money. It's about going through the recovery. It's about having to accept the risks that come with that surgery and complications that could arise. It's all those things. And remember, the complications are not always something that will just be there for a week or two and then you're fine. If double eyelid surgery is done, for example, you could develop dry eye that will be with you for the rest of your life, right? And then you have to be on drops or get other procedures to compensate for that that initial procedure that perhaps either wasn't performed exactly right or was performed perfectly well, and you still had, this type of functional problem that resulted from it. So it's about a lot more than just paying the money.
Also, every country has this kind of oppressive beauty ideal, but I think the major difference between, say, Korea and America is that Korea is more upfront about it. In America, to a certain extent, we still cloak plastic surgery discourse around feeling your best. Self-improvement language doesn't blatantly acknowledge the desire to be pretty for the approval of society. There's also still shame about getting beauty procedures. Not going to name any names, but there are many celebrities who will deny getting any work done, even when anyone with eyes can tell they did.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, again, a balance between being very, very open about work that you've had done, and then also on the flip side of that, completely denying that anything ever happened, right? There's risks to both, to society, especially when it's a celebrity of a high status that we're talking about. And I understand it, both ways. Yeah, maybe it is a cultural difference that in the States, it's not as accepted for like an A-list celebrity to say, oh, I had this procedure or that procedure, whereas maybe in Korea it's more accepted. So I get that, but I also think in Korea, these like K-pop stars, I don't know, I don't see them admitting left and right that they had procedures A, B, C, D, E, and going even further down. So I think once you reach a certain maybe like status as far as celebrity, I think people around the world are maybe less willing to discuss some of those procedures, and that's understandable to a degree as well.
I honestly feel like the reason plastic surgery isn't more accepted in the US is because it's less accessible here, and we have a shrinking middle class that can barely afford things, versus in Korea it's way more accessible, and so you don't have to be like upper class Hollywood to be able to afford a nose job. But not everyone is buying into the beauty industry. There's a movement in Korea called Escape the Corset that pushes back against beauty standards, with the more radical members foregoing makeup entirely and shaving their heads. Who explains why this is so brave, specifically in South Korea? The rejection of basic appearance norms comes with punishing social sanctions for Korean women. These activists have become outcasts at school and at work. Sometimes they're even uninvited to their own family gatherings. One movement member, Ho Ju-yeon, explains her experience. Instead of calling me by my name, my coworkers just call me boy. Why are you like that? They'll ask me. And my family tells me they think appearing with short hair and being makeup free is unsafe for me. Everyone comments about their own discomfort. At first, I tried to explain my thoughts and values, but that's not what they wanted to hear, so now I'm just ignored. Despite detractors, the Escape the Corset movement has successfully ignited many conversations about women's rights, and some consumption data actually shows a decline in beauty-related spending among Korean women in their 20s. I can't say for sure what caused this, but it's interesting nonetheless. Numbers from the Ministry of Economy and Finance indicate that between 2015 and 2018, sales of cosmetics, hair products, and other beauty-related goods dropped 53.5 billion Korean won, approximately $44.8 million, among women in their 20s. And this was also the time when Escape the Corset was heavily talked about.
There's always going to be factions that fight against the norm or the accepted norm. So they're doing that there. We have many of those movements here in the States as well. And I think it's great for a balancing of ideals, really, right? I think when we're just fed a certain narrative and feel the pressure to conform to that narrative, I think that can be dangerous. So having a group that looks at it differently and pushes a very different agenda of feeling free in our bodies to maybe do less, and maybe that's totally fine too, I think can be a good thing as well. So again, I think any one strong view needs to be balanced, I think, in society with something else that can bring things kind of down to reality, so we don't get too carried away with any one specific approach, especially if that approach is somewhat extreme, for everyone to get plastic surgery. I don't think, how does that make sense?
I think a lot of people who don't know too much about Korea and are only exposed to K-pop and the industry abuses going on there, I think they perceive Korea as being a looks-obsessed country. But there's different motivations for why someone might be obsessed with looks that go beyond just individual vanity. And it's after reading these resources, especially Elise Hu's Flawless, that, I can't stop promoting because it's so good. But after reading these things that I feel like I'm able to understand, or more understand, understand more the nuances behind the beauty industry and why it's difficult to make broad stroke statements like, we should just not wear makeup and not get plastic surgery.
Honestly, it's kind of like AI, like people are saying, oh, we should just get rid of AI. Some people are saying, ban AI. I don't think that we're going to be able to ban AI. So let's learn to work with it and to control it and to, create safeguards in many ways. And I think the same thing goes for plastic surgery. Like, we don't need to be going around banning plastic surgery. I think it has a lot of positives that come out of it. But we also shouldn't be just, saying that everyone's got to do this, and it's got to be properly managed and controlled essentially as a tool. I think starts with individuals who are considering these types of surgeries. It also extends to the doctors performing these surgeries. And then, of course, how governments either supervise or don't supervise, some of this work and promote it versus not promote it. There's different ways that the government can get involved for better or worse. But yeah, these are all great things that we need to be discussing. Meaning that they're important to discuss. And I hope that, videos like Mina's and like this reaction get people talking and putting out different ideas, the pros and cons of doing things in different ways. There's not just like one way to think about this, but it also is here to stay. Plastic surgery is not going anywhere. So let's learn to kind of work with it and bring out the best in it, but not overuse it and not create a complete dependence on it.
I mentioned systemic issues before, but another example, Jessica Elfing Huang interviewed 20 women living in Seoul who were 63 and over about their attitudes towards beauty. And the participants explained that beauty work in Korea, at least among elderly women, was understood in the context of respect to others. This concept was referred to as yewi, or correct social etiquette. When WHO interviewed elderly Korean American women in Orange County, their attitudes were similar in that they still believed in performing beauty work in some way. One woman, Elizabeth, exclaimed through laughter, "Let myself go? No, of course not. I still care. I put some moisturizer and a little liner to look like I'm awake."
By the way, we've got an amazing facial moisturizer over at feelconfident.com. So make sure to check that one out. And also, we did a clinical study on our facial moisturizer along with our HA serum. So please review those results and give it a shot. It's a really well-made product that has a lot of great ingredients. We did not skimp on that in our formulation, and people overall have had great things to say. So check it out.
A 71-year-old woman, Jo Young Lim, drew a link between letting herself go and being unhealthy. If we're laying in a hospital, then we're, burdening our children. These attitudes are reminiscent of what journalist Autumn Whitefield Medrano wrote as a defense on beauty in 2016. The number one thing I hear from women when I ask about their reasons for performing beauty work is not that they want to change how they look, but that they want to look like their best selves. It may be human to dream of transformation, but it is practical to dream of simply looking all the time the way we do when we're rested, fed, watered, well-sexed, and nicely groomed. In other words, the reason we perform beauty work is because we are engaged in chronic hope. I think about my own grandma, who is retired, married, and mostly only sees people she's known for years, aka people who absolutely do not care what she looks like. Yet, she styles her hair, keeps her nails painted, and does an elaborate makeup routine every morning. I think about myself and how I feel a lot worse if I don't change out of my pajamas all day, even if I, don't intend to leave my house. A lot of these attitudes have to do with social conditioning. Like, we maybe wrongfully associate putting on makeup with being active or taking part in community. But WHO writes, we should ask ourselves if the labor we're undertaking is ego-driven or soul-driven. Does it lead to more connection with ourselves and others, or disconnection? I think it's always valuable to know the reasons for why we go through aesthetic labor, because it can help us come up with alternative methods for living a freer life. For example, if you associate putting on makeup with seeing your friends, experiment with what it means to not wear makeup and still see your friends, and figure out whether or not you can at some point disconnect the two, and then notice whether or not that disconnection brings any more meaning to your life. I don't know. It's just food for thought. I think that obviously when you put in plastic surgery in here, it adds like another wrench to the equation than just like not wearing makeup for the day. But we like to talk in absolutes when it comes to beauty discourse. I think it serves us less to think of it in those kinds of dichotomies, especially when we're talking about other cultures and, the different kinds of like structural institutions that exist that make us want to adjust our bodies in this specific way.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Mina in many ways. I think that we shouldn't feel like obligated to put on makeup or to get plastic surgery. In many ways, I think it should come from within. I mean, it's good to know what exists out there to be able to make an informed decision. But yeah, I don't think we should look to society to be like, okay, yeah, I guess now I have to go get this procedure done. I don't think that people should feel that degree of pressure. I know that some people do. I get it. But I really think more and more, if it comes from within, that gives the person the better chance of actually being happy with their outcomes and with life in general, right? It's not just about being happy with surgical outcomes. It's about just kind of having like a happiness to your life with every day, ideally, right? I mean, we cannot always be happy in every moment. That's not possible. But, aiming to be happier on most days, I think is a great goal. So again, thank you to Mina for making this awesome, really thought-provoking video, and hopefully you enjoyed the commentary and feedback that I had. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and this is a big topic, so lots to talk about. Thanks for watching.